Welcome to Kuskusum. We're here in the unceded territory of the Comox First Nations, and this is the heart of the Comox Valley. This is an important place, and right now, with Project Watershed, we're doing great work to restore and bring this ecosystem back into health. This is an estuary ecosystem, and these are some of the most biodiverse ecosystems on the planet. They are one of the most important places for many migratory birds, fish habitats, plant life, and so much more. So this concrete, where we're on right now, used to be an old sawmill, and right now, as a regenerative action, we're trying to pull together to bring back the health of this ecosystem, to restore it to its natural diversity, and to bring that wealth of vibration and wealth of health back to the Comox Valley. One of the beauties of the natural world is even against all odds, life wants to thrive and create more biodiversity. I mean, we're here in a concrete wasteland that is the debris and rubble of old human industry, and yet right around me, there are dozens of plants already poking their way through the concrete and building back the soils, building back the microorganisms, and really creating that ecosystem. Our work here is to do restorative, regenerative practices of creating a more healthy ecosystem. So ripping up all this concrete and turning it back into something that can be a place for other species to thrive in, to create more of that conversation between the species. This is an estuary, and these lands are the most biodiverse that we know of. They are the edge of two ecosystems, the ocean and the river ecosystem, where all the watershed comes down and where all the different species come to give birth, to hide, to protect, to feed, and to nourish their young. So let's talk about an estuary for a second. Now, the word estuary comes from the word estrogen, which is really about fertility. These are the lands of fertility. That's why they're called estuaries. It's where fertile soils are, where so much biodiversity is. And we want to talk about some of the plants here, because I'm a herbalist and that's what I love, but it's much more than the plants. It's the complex interweaving of multiple species that create an ecosystem in which buffers the pollutions of our planet, which feeds the soils, which really just nourishes back and restores health to the whole forest, to the whole ocean, to all of these places. Even without our help, you can see how nature is already breaking up the congestion in this area. Many of these plants that come in, the first plants, are nitrogen fixers, but I call them the people plants because they come in to any of our disturbed soils and wastelands and really break up that congestion, that stagnation, and bring health back to the ecosystem so that more biodiversity can thrive in the long run. This one is a cottonwood, and you can see it's all through here just breaking up this concrete, but literally this also does the same thing in our body. It's one for pain, for inflammation, and all these little buds here have a salicylic acid in them, like aspirin, that can really help work with that kind of imbalance in the body. Now, it's just one, but there's also lots of tansy in here. There's yarrow in here. There's Queen Anne's lace or wild carrot. There's St. John's wort. There's peppercress. There's clovers. There's so many plants already starting to build that web of life back to a thriving ecosystem. The big work here at Kuskusum is going to be pulling out all of this rebar and concrete. The byline for this project is unpaved paradise, and literally that's what this is. This is a paradise waiting to be unpaved. In this little area right here, we will see lots of fish spawning, we'll see lots of herons coming in, eagles, many larger species, but also small little microorganisms and worms and lots of plants. This is exciting work because this is the regenerative stage in the human evolution we're at now. We're beyond sustainability, we need to be regenerative, and places like this that are really precious ecosystems are where we can do our best work. Estuaries are home to hundreds of different species of plants, but some of the first ones that come in, things like the alders, really help break up the soils and create more of a nitrogen fixing for those other species to thrive in. This plant is not just a nitrogen fixer and a small deciduous tree, it also is one of the most antiviral substances we know. This catkin contains a lot of medicine. There's a lot of medicine in the alder bark and the leaves, but also we have plants like the blackberry here. As you can see, I've got some blackberries right here. Blackberry works as a place for birds to hide in, but also as food. The seeds travel around and the spikes kind of protect that ecosystem. As they die down and the soils rebuild back, many other species can grow in those environments. So just because we might think of blackberry as a weed sometimes, know that it's only a weed for a short period of time while the ecosystem builds back. And then the blackberry falls down and we've got lots of other species coming in. Here we also have things like the tansy that are coming in. This is a great medicine, but it's also just another one that creates a safe zone for other birds and animals to hide in and to protect them. Something that's not always recognized and understood about estuaries is the economic factor in being a place for fish to hide and lay their eggs, for diversity of species to come in and start to build homes that protect the farmlands and protect the environment around them. The other piece is that these estuaries have a really great ability to inspire us, to give us that beauty of the world to reflect on, to increase our mental health, and to support our bodies in regenerating themselves, in calming down our anxiety. In these turbulent times, it's important to have ecosystems like this intact that we can really just find inspiration from. Here's some Pearly Everlastings, another one of those great plants that thrive in this kind of environment. This tree here is Hawthorne, and it's one of my favorite trees that grows in estuaries. It grows along the edges of all these waterways, but it's also just a really potent medicine. So these berries work for heart stagnation and heart congestion. They're one that kind of open up our circulation and support us. I like to say that the needles for this plant work for sewing up a broken heart. And every time I see it, it just helps fill my heart with more love. A key species for the birds are roses, and rose hips offer a lot of vitamin C and bioflavonoids that really support our bodies, but also the health of any immune system of any creature. So it's just a good one that grows in abundance often in these estuaries. Whoa. Another great plant in an estuary is cattails. Now this is one of the most abundant plants, as you can see all around me, but it's also one that has a lot of protein in the top seed heads, a lot of starch in the roots, and has been used by many First Nations cultures around the world as a way of thatching and building housing, building basketry, building all kinds of things they may need, even fishing nets. So this plant that often grows in these environments works really well to buffer that zone. It also creates a bit of a marsh stability in the lands for all different fish to hide in, for ducks to lay their eggs in, and for various other organisms to thrive and create homes in. Even though it's late in the season and you can't tell how much diversity of tree species there are here, this is one of the most bio-rich regions for trees because of the different layerings of the canopy and the open light. There's a lot of species that can thrive here. Some of the species that are unique to this ecosystem are things like the willows. There are about 3 or 4 different types of willows that grow here. We also see lots of smaller trees like the twinberry or the coastal ocean spray. We see saskatoons and bitter cherries. We see all types of elderberries or those hawthorns that we were looking at. We see lots of alder and cottonwood, but also a wide variety of other things like mountain ash and some of the conifers in this part of the world, like the spruce that really thrive here, the hemlock, the pine, even cedar. This is a really diverse part of the tree interspecies connection that we find on this planet, and estuaries are home to so much of this type of life. In this part of the world, cedar is the tree of life, and it's one that really thrives with some wet feet. It also is that protector of ecosystems. So here's a nice little cedar just getting started. So here we have some snowberry or ghostberry. This is one of those great plants that keeps its berry late into the season. And all through here we have things like the salmonberry. Salmonberry is one of the first berries that gives its fruits in the spring for the birds, and it's one of my favorites. One of the reasons this is called salmonberry is it actually grows in these kinds of estuaries where many of the salmon come and die and fertilize that back up. So it is a key species in this part of the world. Here's a little sword fern getting ready to make its babies. We also see a lot of the deer fern and lady fern and bracken fern and a variety of other kinds of ferns in this environment too. So here we have a nice little patch of peppercrest. It's kind of a ground cover all through this area. It's a very tasty edible. It's in the mustard family, so it has a little bit of spice, hence the name peppercrest. But it's plants like this that encourage other herbivores to come in and feed. So this might be one that deer are going to eat and other species like that. There are many small and unassuming plants that thrive in estuary ecosystems. Things like this herb of Robert or this geranium species that have a lot of medicine, a lot of benefit for our body. We also see things like the curly dock and lots of small ground cover that really holds in the soils and increases the microbiological health, the organisms underground to really thrive in this environment. Lots of things like self-heal, plantains, meadow rue, lots of ferns. There is so much richness. There's at least 1,000 different plants that can grow in this environment. And something that I think is really interesting is that as we do this regenerative work to restore these ecosystems, we see these plants naturally find their way into these environments and create that kind of diversity. But we can also help this along the way. So here, the estuary used to be home to a lot of camas, a lot of the blue camas, which is a very rich and important food staple to the Comox First Nations people, to all different First Nations people in the West Coast. We also see things like the monkey flower, which I know are in some of the estuaries over there. These plants, these unique species, will come back into this environment and really create a better diversity, more stability, again, for our planet and for the future of this place in general. So I've only touched on a few of the plants that can be found in this ecosystem. Mature estuaries can have literally hundreds of different species, and the more biodiverse they are, the more stable they are. And this type of stability helps to offset a lot of the pollution, helps to bioremediate out toxins, increases and supports our watershed. They also are home to hundreds of different birds, insects, animals, small little critters, and things we can't even see. This is the richness of our planet. And if you find yourself in these places, one of the things to do that we can do at home is just to pick up garbage. So if we're looking around and we see, oh, here's a piece of garbage. Something I do is I have what I call a rainbow pocket, and it's my back pocket usually where I'll put some of that garbage in and start to just clean up these places. The more we appreciate them, the more they appreciate. And as they appreciate, they grow the wealth of this planet back, helping to support us, but also every other species in finding real health here on planet Earth. The work being done here at Kuskusum is some of the most important work we can do to restore, to rebalance, to regenerate these precious estuary ecosystems. Estuaries, as I said before, are the most vibrant place for life to thrive in. The wealthiest biodiversity on our planet comes into these places between the ecosystems where that conversation of all different species happens. This is a place for food, a place for regeneration, a place for protection, safety, and just thriving to create a pollution-free planet to build a better world that our hearts know is possible. All right. Thanks for joining me in this video. I hope you learned a bit about estuaries and why they're so important to protect, as well as if you want to tune into what's happening with Kuskusum, check out projectwatershed.ca for all the details. This is going to take a number of years, and this is just the tip of the iceberg in regenerating this planet.